On January 15th, 1999, I shot and killed Mr. Min Nguyen and tried to shoot and kill his three friends, David Tran, Vincent Vivang Donegal, and Andrew Vivang Donegal. I was tried for the death penalty, but because I lied at trial, I got rid of evidence, and I coached witnesses. I was only found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in the California prison system. But I wasn't born a murderer. I was born in Vietnam and settled here in the United States as a toddler. We lived in Provo, Utah, very similar to this town here, Boulder. And Utah for me was a beautiful place for my childhood, for the most part. I did experience what I've come now to understand as racism. One of the earliest experiences that I remember that left a big imprint on me was when my younger brother and I, we were playing with our G.I. Joes in the ditch. I was about 8 years old, and some older kids were on the other side of the fence, and they told us, "Get out of here, go back to your country, go home," and called us some racial words. My brother and I don't know, the fence looked so big, I didn't think they would be able to so we told them, "Make us get out of there." Those kids jumped the fence pretty quickly and started chasing us. They had some adults there too. I think it may have been their uncles or perhaps their father or something, or older brothers. But I had dropped some of my action figures, and my younger brothers stopped to pick it up. And I remember the older kids caught up, pushed my brother on the ground, put dirt in his mouth, and I stood there crying. So him and I went home crying. And my father, when he found out what happened, he said, "You never ever let anybody harm your family." I had felt so ashamed. And I remember telling myself, like, I'm not going to let anybody harm my family ever again. My father was diagnosed with leukemia later that year. We moved out to California, and he passed away when I was 13. I remember I was so angry at my mom, my dad, God, the world. But I found a lot of acceptance in the criminal and gang lifestyle. By the age of 17, I was arrested for the first time, and I went down a long, dark path that ultimately culminated in the murder of another human being. I'm also ashamed to say that for the first 11, 12 years of my prison sentence, I felt no sense of remorse. I'd never grasped the finality of what I did until I started asking myself those questions. What am I doing here? Am I meant to die in prison? Is this it for me? I remember finding solace reading these books from the saints, and I realized every single one of these human beings were very flawed at one time or another. Yet they were able to leave such legacies, and they were able to touch so many lives. And I remember asking myself, why could I not do the same thing in here? Even if I'm to die in prison, why could I not leave some type of legacy? I remember the morning when it shifted in my head that I had a choice in this. I was on the prison yard. My head was filled with the teachings of the saints. And somewhere in my mind, it just clicked like, I can make a choice. I can try to leave a legacy. I can become a better person. I remember distinctly, I was standing by the fence. The sun I felt the warmth of the sun. I saw the dew on the individual blades of grass. For the first time, probably in 12 years, I heard that sparrow that was sitting in the razor wire chirping. And suddenly prison was no longer this ugly, harsh place, but it took on such a soft light for me. And from that day forth, I began connecting with other human beings, even while in prison, even while doing my life sentence. I remember one of the first NPR radio interviews they did with me. The reporters were asking about the groups that I had created with some of the other men that were still inside, that were inside. And somewhere in the process of the interview, she asked me, "What are you in prison for?" I said, "Murder." I remember everything in me wanted to explain, because everything in me up to that point had always explained, wait, but it's a gang crime, but wait, it was this, or wait, but I just wanted to sit with it. And I was totally terrified what she was thinking of me. But the longer I sat with it, the more I felt like liberated in a sense, like, yes, I did do that, but yes, I'm no longer that person. From that day forth, when it was ever brought up, I just said I was in prison for the murder of another human being. I remember one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had to have was with my mother. This was like in 2015, right before I went to my board hearing. And she was very concerned what was going to happen at the board hearing, if they were going to let me go, if they were going to deny me. And I said, "Mom, it doesn't matter. Like, let's just be happy that I'm alive. Let's be happy that you get to hug and kiss me." She says, "Yes, but I want you to go home." I said, "Yes, and I want to go home too." I said, "But Mom, you do realize why I'm in prison, right?" Of course, she cried too. I told her, let's be grateful that she can hug and kiss me. I remind her there's another mother just like her that doesn't have a son that's alive. I've been home now about 2 years. I was paroled. Governor Brown signed my paperwork after the parole hearing, and they let me go home. And now I get to spend so much time with my mom, and I love it. It's like every Sunday we'll go to Mass, and then after that we'll go and have our Sunday lunch date. We get to eat lunch together. And I love it. We sit across, and I could just feel the joy oozing out of her, because that's how I feel with it. We're actually sitting at a table instead of a small prison table. We're eating good food instead of the vending machine food. But there's still something that weighs heavy on me. Back in 2011, when I started to grasp what remorse was, I wrote a letter to the mother of the man I killed. and I sent it off to the Office of Victim Services. I remember when I first wrote the letter, it was like 3-4 pages long, all these eloquent sounding words, but I realized I was hiding. I was using those words to hide behind it. And I thought to myself, like, what could I really say to the mother of the man that I killed? If I had been killed that night, what could somebody say to my mom to alleviate her pain? And I realized there was nothing. So I cut down my letter, I chopped it up to about 6-7 sentences, and I sent it off. A couple months later, the Office of Victim Services sent back to my central file the original letter, which meant that she never received it because she never registered with the Office of Victim Services. My friends on the yard with me told me were very happy that I got the letter back because it meant she wasn't going to show up to my parole hearing. But I wanted her to receive that letter. Part of me felt guilty because then I realized in my mind this increases my very slight chances of parole. But then I felt guilty because I wanted to go home with my mom. So I still have that letter. And I wanted to read it today because she never received it. It's dated November 5th, 2011. Dear Mrs. Julie Nguyen, I want you to know I am truly sorry for taking your son's life. I am sorry for forever tainting the way you may see the world and taking the joy out of it. I pray that in some small way my words could provide some measure of healing for you. I want you to know that I am not the same person that committed this violent and senseless act. And am living a life from here on out to honor the man who I will be forever paying my penance for. Your son, Minh Nguyen. Thank you.